to see you all here today for this 2025 Warren Centre Innovation Lecture. A special welcome to our Chancellor, David Thodey, our Provost, Anna-Marie Jargos, Hesham El-Gamal, who's the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and IT. I want to welcome also the members of the Warren Centre and other distinguished invitees, and of course our guest speaker for today, Dr. Michelle Deaker. My name's Julie Canny. I am a professor in the Faculty of Engineering and IT. I'm also presently serving as our Deputy Vice-Chancellor Research here at the University of Sydney. And I will be your MC this afternoon. But before I begin the formalities, I'd like to kick things off by introducing the wonderful Yvonne Weldon, who's from the Metropolitan Aboriginal Land Council, who's going to be welcoming us to country today. Yvonne.
I'm slightly too short, I think. I'm not sure. How do we... It's all right. Do you want me to hold it? Can you move it? I don't... Oh, there you go. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers. My name is Yvonne Weldon. I am a Wiradjuri woman from Cowra, here in New South Wales. From the waters of the Clare, which later became known as the Lachlan, and of the Murrumbidgee rivers. Unfortunately, where we're gathered, there aren't any people that have met legal requirements to be regarded as traditional owners of these lands. And so I am a representative of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, who are caretakers with Culture Authority under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act. I would like to pay my respects to all elders, past and present, to all First Nations, to you, and the ancestors of the lands that you've travelled from or are from. For some reason, people have views about welcomes to country, or even acknowledging the First Nations people. When that happens, it further dispossesses the First Nations. I thank you for including me, not just in murals, but in our reality of our worlds, because when you include the First Nations, you include us all. We're meeting on your country. The boundaries of our traditional owners are embedded into the Earth's natural landscapes. The boundaries of the Eora are the Hawkes River in the north, the Nepean in the west, and the Georges River in the south. On behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, the elders and the members, I welcome everyone to the lands of the Gadigal. I acknowledge the Gadigal people, whose spirits and ancestors will always remain with this land, our Mother Earth. My people have been a part of this land for more than 65,000 years. We are the world's oldest continuously living culture. And wherever you travel across our beautiful continent, there are hundreds of nations, tribes and clans existing before all written words and all history, and it continues here today. Aboriginal people are inclusive of all from across these lands where we do have hundreds of nations from here and also from across the globe, where the sharing and the trading of our resources, our knowledge and our traditions has been my people's way of life since time began. We traded and we shared amongst the nations and the tribes and the clans, but we also traded with many nations from across the globe. Just as we are trading, or rather as we're sharing here today, the insights, expertise and innovation on the economy and capital capability, but also in all parts of our lives and our world. It's not just the technology that has the intelligence. It is the brilliance and the innovation of each and every one of you, your industries and fields, for those around us to use the opportunities to make a positive difference for all. All of us together can bring about positive changes to multiple generations, from our ancient, still relevant world into the digital, contemporary one, bringing my people, your people, and all our people together. Think about the difference that you are making today and what we need to do every single day to become the milestones of an all-inclusive future. To make that future possible, let us all draw upon my people's spirits as we continue on our journey. May my people's spirits walk with you and guide you as we strive forward for us all. Again, on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, Ninyini, Nala, Wongan, Mari, Bajari, Gadi, Nurda, welcome to Gadigal country. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Yvonne, for that very warm welcome. And I too would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the land of the Gadi people and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And of course, as we attend this lecture on innovation today, we remind ourselves that people have been innovating on these lands for tens of thousands of years. Now I would like to invite to the lectern our Chancellor, a great champion of innovation, and in fact last year's speaker at the Warren Centre Innovation, David Thodey.
Thanks, Julie, and great to see you all. Wonderful to have you all here. And Yvonne, thank you for that. She's gone. Anyway, there you are. Thanks for that wonderful welcome to country. And, I pay my respect to traditional owners as well. And we're very grateful to be on these lands today. And I'll get this microphone right in a moment. The Warren Centre, what a wonderful, wonderful initiative it's been. And, I was just doing a bit of reflection. I've been involved in the Warren Centre, actually going back a while now, even when I was at Telstra. And it was 82 when it was started, and I think the history goes back 100 years. But it's all about innovation and, finding opportunities to innovate and actually break out of some of our traditional thinking. And I think it's so important, but also bring industry together with academia and with government. And, I was reading, it's about challenging convention and redefining the world of possibility. And I think that's so important for all of us, whether you're in education or you're doing research or innovation, you're an undergrad, postgrad. That's what life is about, because it's in that renewal that we get value creation, and it's across all the disciplines as well. So I just wanted to thank the Warren Centre for all that they do before I introduce Michelle, because Chris and the board have done this for a number of years, and it just keeps on keeping on, and we're really grateful for it, and we need more of it as we go forward. So I'm going to keep on challenging convention as Chancellor of Sydney University and thinking about redefining the world of possibilities. So today we're absolutely delighted to have Dr. Michelle Deaker, and I've known Michelle, going back a few years now. But, I think that Michelle has really embodied a lot of that world of possibility, from the time that she's been involved in setting up OneVentures, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. And she was really a bit of a pioneer in that world as a founder of that wonderful group. And it's all about deploying capital, working with, companies to help them be successful. So I think Michelle's going to bring a really unique insight into that world today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about what some of your learnings and reflections have been, Michelle, over that time. But I am very conscious that innovation is technology, but it's about people and process, and I think I talked a little bit about that last year, because you can't just it isn't just that moment of brilliance. I wish it was just moments of brilliance, but actually it's really hard work. It's about finding ideas, driving true research, and then obviously that translation process. So thank you to the Warren Centre, firstly, for all that you do. Thank you to Michelle for being here, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. And am I introducing Michelle now? No, I'm not. Okay, so I won't introduce you quite yet, Michelle, but great to see you all. I'm really looking forward to great presentation, but I'm also looking forward to wonderful, wonderful things coming from Sydney University and DVC Research and Hisham and the engineering IT. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for those words, Chancellor. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Chris von Willer, who is the chair of the Warren Centre Advisory Board and also a great friend of the University of Sydney. Chris.
Thanks, Julie, and thank you, Chancellor David Thodey, for those kind words. I'm going to share with you a bit of history. William Henry Warren is the person that the Warren Centre is named after. So 141 years ago today, on a fine, I think it was the 3rd of March actually, in 1884, Australia's first engineering faculty was established at this university under the leadership of Professor Warren. So Warren was an innovator. If you look at the history books, he championed the German idea of investigation by experiment. Sounds a bit self-obvious, but nevertheless, that's what he was attributed to. He made a lot of contributions to public infrastructure, roads, bridges, other parts of nation building through New South Wales. Then he moved to this university, and educated future generations of engineers. So we were the first engineering faculty for decades through William Henry Warren. So this innovation lecture, which is part of what the Warren Centre does, is the 25th in the annual series. It started back in the mid-90s, which, if you remember, was the time of the internet boom. So innovation was rampant, economic productivity was rampant. Since then, as you know, we've fallen in a bit of a hole. Productivity is flatlining, and it's now becomes a national imperative to revive that. Innovation is the key. So with Michelle Deaker, next week is the Economic Roundtable. I view this lecture and your insights today as a bit of a curtain raiser for those folk in Canberra. We'll make sure it's online, they can check it out. So on behalf of the Warren Centre, welcome Michelle Deaker, and we look forward to hearing the talk this afternoon.
Thank you, Chris. And now the part that you've all been waiting for, and my job, which is to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Michelle Deaker. Michelle is the founder and a managing partner at OneVentures, a leading Australian venture capital firm that manages over $900 million in funding. As a later stage VC, they focus on scaling tech and healthcare companies through growth, equity and credit, and they invest in founders who are building for the future. The work they do is very complementary to the early stage innovation work that we do here at the university and supports the type of activity that we are really trying to build here. Michelle is an Honours 1 science graduate from this university with a double major in chemistry and physics. And I understand that she actually started her PhD here at the University of Sydney. Family circumstances then took her to Canberra, where she ended up writing up a master's and then undertaking a PhD at the University of Canberra. But we are not going to hold that against her, especially considering she has a daughter who's studying engineering here at the university right now. Michelle has led or co-led some of the most successful VC-backed deals. These include some fantastic, successful Australian startups that you will have heard of, like Employment Hero and Vaxis. She also serves on the boards of Employment Hero, Focus and BuildKite, and she's a member of the Reserve Bank of Australia's Payment Systems Board, a fascinating role. Before starting OneVentures, Michelle built several successful businesses herself, including one of Australia's first fintech companies, Ecom Industries, an IT services firm called Networks Beyond 2000, and a tertiary tutoring business. She's also a champion of women in STEM and is the co-founder of WinVC, a not-for-profit that supports women in venture capital. Please give a warm welcome to our guest speaker today, Dr. Michelle Deaker.
Well, thank you, David, Julie and Chris. I'm really delighted to be here to present today's Warren lecture. My family actually has 3 generations of Sydney University engineers, and while not an engineer myself, I hope that through my career I've managed to back many great engineers on their journey to entrepreneurship. I have a sculpture in my garden, which I've called The Road Less Travelled. And it represents for me the poem by Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, which is often completely misunderstood. The poem isn't actually about taking like the untrodden path or the less obvious path. It's actually about arriving at a fork in the road and making a decision in your life that takes you down a path where that choice has made a difference. And I think when I look back on my life, that's what my life represents for me, where I've come along to a fork in the road and then made a choice to go down a certain path. I was very fortunate in my life to have multi-generational role models of entrepreneurship in my family. My great-grandmother arrived in Australia from Scotland with 4 children, and her 2 sons created the largest orchard in the Southern Hemisphere, which became SPC. And my great-uncle, Sir John Gladstone Black MacDonald, went on to become Premier of Victoria. My grandmother, who was an accomplished singer, decided that actually she would move to Sydney to study opera under Maestro Fossati. But having come from an entrepreneurial family and needing to fund her singing lessons, she founded a dance company, having learnt dancing back in Scotland. And that company, that school called the Anne MacDonald College of Dancing, or fondly known as Miss Max, went on to have thousands of students to train all the debutantes in Sydney and run all the wartime dances during the war years. That school still exists today and will be 100 years old next year. This school became so large and successful, in fact, that my grandmother gave up her opera singing. And I was born to Jeff Markham, a Sydney University engineer, and Margaret Markham, an educational entrepreneur. I think they were both really my inspiration. I inherited my father's analytical maths brain. In fact, nothing gives me more joy than solving a good problem. And I inherited also my mother's creative entrepreneurial spirit. She went on to take my grandmother's school, take over that business, and then establish what became Australia's first high school for the performing arts. And I was very fortunate in those years to watch my mother and the struggles she went through and the determination to establish that school and do something new in Australia which hadn't been done before. Of course, now there are many schools that offer performing arts in their programs. But that was a very good learning ground for me in what it means to be an entrepreneur and to do something new. I think also that it also taught me, as David was saying, that it's really hard work being an entrepreneur and creating something new, and you really have to persevere if you really want to be successful. I've therefore grown up watching this success and achievement through hard work. I saw my mother's school blossom and many great artists come out of there, people like Sarah Murdoch, Nikki Webster, Natalie Imbruglia, Sophie Lowe, the list goes on. And I saw too that work can create opportunity, but luck comes through preparation. And Mum also showed me that if you had a vision, you could really make that come true if you worked at it. So this physics chemistry double major from Sydney University had an entrepreneurial streak and had to make a change for the better. At Sydney University, I was involved in the Science Association. I ran science inter-faculty sport for many years. Later at University of Canberra, I served on Student Welfare Committee, Science Faculty Board as student rep. I had a stint on academic board and later set up the Postgraduate Association for the University of Canberra on request of the Vice-Chancellor. Service was sort of ingrained through my parents in me, and giving something back was really important. But I also learnt through those experiences that you've got to bring a team of people with you, because those people are the people that enable your vision to come to life. And in all those activities that I did whilst at university, there was always a team of people involved, and actually I ultimately represented this university and later Australia in ultimate frisbee as well, and that team was important to me as well. So I started my first business while I was at university. In Canberra, I founded a tertiary tutoring business with a girlfriend, And that was taking my first steps in understanding that you needed to make money. So revenue had to exceed your costs if you were going to be a sustainable business. Before I finished my PhD, I had my first child, and my husband and I moved back to Sydney. And that was when my mother called me up and she says, darling, you aren't doing anything. And I thought, well, not really. I have a 9-month-old child, I'm writing up a PhD, but I guess I'm not doing anything. Our family always thought, actually, that busy people had more time. She went on, I have this grant to put technology into the performing arts. Could you help me implement it? So the school had been given $100,000 from the government. But before I finished that implementation, I had a 10-month-old baby, I was writing up a thesis, and I had a technology company. After all, the entrepreneur in me said that I could set up a distributorship, do a lot more if I was running my own business for the school. And by the time I finished that contract for the school, I had a business called Networks Beyond 2000. At the time, Beyond 2000 was a well-watched TV show. And Networks 2000 was a really good networking business, so everyone thought they automatically knew my business. And I was able to leverage that to get that company off the ground. And it grew, and I was employing people before I finished my PhD. Now, I was not just running a business on the side of academic work. This business was rapidly growing, and it had a big client base, but I found there was a really big problem. That was that it was a margin on headcount business, and it was impossible to scale. And I really wanted to find a business that I could scale rapidly. And I started playing around with the internet because I saw the internet coming. And it was in the very early days of e-commerce. I was buying domain names. I was setting up e-stores for my clients to buy product online. It was very clunky. But for me, I was just in preparation. And as they say, luck is where opportunity meets preparation. It was Mother's Day 1997. My mother-in-law received a gift voucher for Mother's Day. And my then husband said, gift vouchers online would be a good thing to do. And I looked at him and I said, wow, that's the best idea you've ever had in your life. I think he regretted that statement. I went home that day, I brought every domain name related to gift vouchers on the internet because I knew how to do it. And that day, giftvouchers.com was born. It was another fork in the road, and I redirected my IT business to building this new online gift voucher business and bringing people along with me. And I was very fortunate that my brother had been working with an entrepreneur, and he understood the capital markets. And so I actually started to think about growing a technology business and taking on board capital. So I went on to develop what became one of Australia's fintech companies. But this was not a straight line. Of course, a woman trying to raise capital was never going to be easy. I was battling the odds. The big e-commerce Christmas of 1999, and some of you may remember it, it actually didn't happen. I learnt never to believe your ad company when they're creating a business model for you. The internet bubble burst and we had to hunker down. We needed to pivot, and listening to our clients, they told us that the gift vouchers online was great. People can buy them there, they can redeem them in store. These were all the big retailers, people like Dimmix, Roger David. And they said, but our real problem is in store. We lose our gift vouchers, we can't track and manage them. And we developed the first patents around tracking of electronic codes through the internet, right through into the banking, payments and FPOS systems. And in fact, we filed that at about the same time that Amazon filed their one-click shopping and online voucher technology. So Amazon were the only ones that had any patent rights over our technology. So we explored the FPOS system and the banks, and we managed to integrate through the entire banking system, leveraging our clients' relationships with the banks. And that business went on to become the leading prepaid cards and electronic voucher business in Australia. We were transacting about $1 billion a year and doing more transactions at the time than all the credit unions combined. We started expanding into the UK, New Zealand, South Africa, and then we were acquired by a UK publicly listed company. The result was 4.6 times money and an IRR of 70%. I'm pleased to tell you that because I now know that's good, but at the time I wasn't so sure. After I sold my business, I found myself mentoring entrepreneurs. I made my first investment as an angel, working alongside Australian and UK entrepreneurs that I backed. A payments business in London, an ad tech business in San Francisco, a data security company in Seattle. I haven't mentioned mentors, but I was very lucky to have many. And one of those mentors was the managing director of SAP in Australia. He really taught me everything I knew about sales because when I was running a business, after all, I was a science geek that had graduated as an entrepreneur. And I really needed the support to understand the business world. And when I exited that company, he said to me over a coffee, "Michelle, have you ever thought about venture capital?" So I hit another fork in the road and thought, I guess I could do that. And being entrepreneurial, I thought I'd better learn what being a venture capitalist really means. I had raised $6.5 million for my company and obviously exited that. But, you know, what does it really take to be a venture capital person other than just investing in startups? And he knew the managing partner of a venture capital firm, so I offered a day a week and I went in to learn everything there was about venture capital. And I named my angel investment company OneVentures. One was one of my favourite songs by U2, and if you know the song, it's actually about transformation, but I love the fact that it could also mean one team. So I was at another fork in the road. I hired one of my former staff members. I looked and researched the entire market, every firm, everything that they had invested in. I started volunteering. I started funding conferences. So I was being the entrepreneur and I was building the OneVentures brand in the market. I was surprised to find that not many VCs actually existed that could bring the marriage of experience operationally with capital to innovation. And I thought that that was really important to match capital with capability and innovation. Life never quite runs in straight lines. I was building and raising capital. There was a government innovation investment fund you could apply for, and then the global financial crisis happened. I brought on board two partners, Paul Kelly and Anne-Marie Burkle, and we originally had the capital required to match the government money, and all of it fell away, and we had to raise it again. But being the entrepreneur, we made it work. We even managed to get a broking firm to underwrite a bit of the money. The government accepted it, and we launched and raised our first $40 million fund back in 2020. One thing that I will say is that I think it's absolutely essential that government plays a role in building the ecosystem in this country. And the other thing that I will say is I think the funding and models need to be consistent. They shouldn't start and stop. We need to make sure that these programs continue year after year. So I often think the only way I know how to raise a fund in a global financial crisis is because I took a tech company through the tech crash and came out the other side. 15 years later, OneVentures is close to $1 billion in funds under management. There are now 7 partners in the firm. We've grown every year, and we're in market for our 7th $200 million fund. Today, our portfolio companies are award winners, and they're disrupting the markets they serve. We now offer 3 different types of capital in the market. We offer growth equity to technology and clinical healthcare companies, and we also have a credit product that we brought in from overseas because it was a product available for our companies when they went offshore but couldn't access it here. And that's credit for high growth technology companies. It's very specialised. We've invested in about 50 portfolio companies and had the privilege to invest in some really global game changers. We've always been very for purpose as a driver in our business. When capital and capability, as I say, meet innovation, real magic can happen. And that's why I'm so passionate about finding ways to unlock capital, to provide hands-on expertise to our companies, and to fuel innovation through creating supportive innovation ecosystems. I just thought I'd share 5 of these companies with you now. The first is Fleet Space Technologies, which is building a constellation of nanosatellites for use in applications across mining and agriculture. And let's hear from co-founder, CEO and rocket scientist, Flavia Tata-Nadini.
If I look at the history of time, exploration is inside our DNA. I think it's what is beautiful about humankind. It's what makes us finding new medicines, new places, new people, new planets. This is who we are.
I would read all the stories about the early days of the space industry.
We managed to get something which someone built in a workshop to orbit the Earth.
I was looking at that going, I want to be part of that. And when I got the chance, I grabbed it with both hands. We launched Australia's first 4 commercial nanosatellites in 2018.
Those spacecraft will be the vehicle for us to deliver our solutions anywhere on Earth and beyond.
We connect things. We can connect industry assets, and we are going directly to high-value applications end-to-end.
We went looking at the hardest problems to solve in the world right now, and one of those is the energy crisis and this huge need to increase critical mineral production. And what we're doing is changing exploration so that it is super scalable. And this is the way we think exploration can be done on this planet, but also all through our solar system.
Mission and liftoff. Fleet Space Centauri 5, separation confirmed.
I know that the growth, the development, the effort, the teamwork, Fleet is going to make something big and help a lot of people. That's important to me.
So while some companies have ambitions to explore in space, other companies like Focus Software are simply making life more productive. Focus helps mid-market companies unlock their data for better decision-making. We supported the company to launch new products, expand their geographic footprint, with the company growing in the time of our investment from 40 million in enterprise value to over 500 million. And I should point out that Fleet Space that you just saw is now worth about $800 million. And I think, again, when we came in, probably at about 100 million. Julie mentioned earlier about Employment Hero, where I served on the board. We initially helped the founder to restructure his HR legal services firm and spin his HR platform product out into a new company. And I took chair of the board back in 2016. I retired from chair in 2023 when the company hit a $2 billion enterprise value, and it's continuing to grow globally. We worked on leadership, governance, bringing that capability into this company, opening the roadblocks to success, helping a company acquire their payroll provider to expand globally, and the company has been a major success story for which we're very proud. We obviously love our companies to have impact, and Bivacor is one of those where we can't go too much further. Founded by Daniel Timms, biomedical engineer, he decided to design a new total artificial heart. People had tried before, trying to mirror the human heart with its two-sided pump, but Daniel took a completely different approach, and he used maglev technology with a spinning disc as the pump, and it even had a heartbeat associated with it. So people had failed trying to mimic the human heart. Daniel approached it with a completely novel technology, and we backed that. He knocked on the door of Texas Heart from Australia and says, I have a new design for a total artificial heart. Now that heart has been in 8 patients. We've saved 8 lives, so we say replacing hearts and saving lives, and Bivacor's doing that, and we're really proud. It's a $30 billion market, very huge unmet need. I think there's 1 million people diagnosed with heart failure and about 10,000 transplants a year. Vaxis is another one of those companies with huge societal impact. The company is replacing 18th century technology with a patch for vaccination. In fact, if vaccines had been around during the pandemic, it would have saved $500 billion to the US economy in the first 2 years and about 200,000 lives just in the US. So we know the impact of this technology is huge. The net present value of the company's vaccine pipeline is now over $1.3 billion. And we've taken this company from being literally benchtop research to where it is today. And I'll show you where it is today.
I feel very privileged to be able to welcome you all here today to the official opening of the new Vaxis biomedical facility. In 3 to 5 years, it's our plan that Vaxis will produce the first vaccine patches to supply to Australia and also around the world.
The opening of this facility in Brisbane's North Shore has been about a decade in the making, more than 10 years ago out of the University of Queensland. And since then, we've received incredible support from the Queensland State Government, the Australian Federal Government, and our valued venture investors, especially OneVentures, along with Brandon Capital, US-based healthcare ventures, and others.
If the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that our approach to vaccination, as it has been in the past, has to change. And this provides Australia and Queensland with the sovereign capability to serve our population and the globe's population with innovative technologies for vaccination and improve healthcare overall.
So there really is no shortage of opportunities or global problems for our entrepreneurs to solve for the capital we need to invest. We often talk about punching above our weight in Australia, but I wonder if this is just a nice way of saying that a lot of the time we underinvest in the opportunities we produce. The capital markets are very shallow in Australia, and when we look at great entrepreneurs like this and their innovations, this takes hundreds of millions of investment to reach sustainable success. I have to show a few graphs because, you know, I'm a scientist. But if I look at venture capital investment in Australia over the last 10 years, we've seen an upward trend generally, on average 3 to 4 billion being invested per annum, about 400 to 600 deals. It sounds like a big number, you might think, but actually this is about a tenth our global peers on a per capita basis. So we're actually growing off a really small base. I recall visiting Israel in 2017 with Macquarie Bank. At the time, they were investing $4 billion a year and returning $16 billion into their economy. That economy is now investing $8 to $10 billion per year. So the scale relative to Australia is just so much greater for a third of the population. One of the things that struck me was the way innovation was being dealt with by their government at all levels, from smaller seed funding through governments contributing matching capital into venture funds, through to funding programs we've seen. And we've seen some of those types of programs in Australia, but again, just not consistent and the longevity that innovation requires. Despite our underinvestment, Australia really can compete on the global stage. And an interesting statistic is the fact that technology unicorns can be produced much more efficiently in Australia than in other markets, including the United States. Our investment returns in the short, medium and long term are as good as all our global peers. And so there's no reason why our large superannuation funds can't invest back here at home. The issue is not returns, but rather one of size and scale. In particular, we know that there's very material opportunity in AI. AI is projected to create 200,000 new jobs by 2030 and a market worth $115 billion in Australia alone. And I recall sitting on a televised panel 5 years ago where I predicted a $3 trillion industry. So clearly I've significantly underestimated the value of that opportunity. Our investors, you know, the global world is powering ahead here. Our entrepreneurs are pedaling to try and keep up. And I think we've really got to get behind them and invest behind them. So when you hear stories like Bivacor or consider the significant AI and automation opportunity in front of us in this age of machines, it's hard to imagine why innovation is often the poor cousin or forgotten, both when considering policy and in the Australian corporate sector. So what barriers do we see preventing us from unlocking great Australian innovation? Remembering that success in innovation requires the marriage of that capital, capability, along with great innovation. Offshore capital and markets can be attractive for innovative companies. There's typically a lower regulatory burden, greater access to capital, and a lower tax environment. Despite the depths of our superannuation industry, where, as Julie acknowledged, just a tiny fraction would fund a thriving innovation economy, our policy settings for superannuation are a significant disincentive for our industry. Everything from fees over net returns, benchmarking of super funds, the consolidation of the superannuation industry just being so big that they can't invest. And because of the pressure on fees, where there used to be fund of funds that sat in the middle of the market and could fund the venture ecosystem, they don't exist anymore in Australia. They exist overseas. It's incredibly important that we have a breadth of ecosystem. And at the moment as well, most superannuation funding in Australia goes to just a few firms in the market. And back in 2021, I think we counted something like 150 small venture capital firms providing that seed and innovation capital. Just one last story. I met with an entrepreneur who sold his business to Intel for $16 billion. And he said to me that he was really ahead of the market, and they started selling what they could do when they were in self-driving cars and LiDARs and innovation in those areas. And he said to me, "Michelle, we're an overnight success story that took 15 years." We need to make sure that the doors to capital remain open in the private markets. This includes understanding the impacts of tax policies and potential carve-outs, exemptions, or indexing. I'm thinking here, for example, about unrealised gains being taxed. Already we're seeing investors moving money from their self-managed super funds out of the sector. Other examples include talk about potential changes to capital gains, which also have a material impact on capital availability. Investors will not want to lock up capital for 10 years without access to future capital gains. And we're already seeing investor sentiment shifting capital from long-dated funds to more liquid assets. The ASX has also traditionally been another source of capital for our companies as they grow and develop. Current ASX regulations are a disincentive for private innovative companies, where taking risk can lead to individual penalties for directors. Disclosure requirements mean that companies have to put out their material plans to the full market, and often that's highly competitive, innovative information for an innovative young company. So we really need to flip the dial on the way we think about funding, the funding landscape and innovation if we're really to make it work and to solve some of these regulatory problems that exist. And I'm hoping to see the Minister on Thursday, and I'll certainly be telling him my views. Just to finish up, there is lots of talk about the productivity roundtable. What I do know is that innovation, along with the right policy settings, creates productivity. So they're all talking about productivity. This is the answer. If I had a set of recommendations for the roundtable, I would table increased investment in R&D. And I know in this room, I'm talking to the converted. We would work to attract R&D operations of major multinational corporations. This will have a flow-on effect into our economy, as we see in other markets, including the spin-offs that are happening right now in Silicon Valley out of all the major companies that exist there. R&D creates creativity, and innovative ideas fosters new company development. The R&D tax rebate has been the lifeblood of the innovation economy and we should make sure that is preserved at all costs. To address the capability barrier, we need to continue to address skilled migration so that we can bring talent in to support our companies, with that talent often coming from offshore. Continuing to upskill our own economy is essential, both in terms of AI skills and STEM, and that's something I'm very passionate about, including for young girls, bringing them through STEM programs. On the capital front, I would like to see Australia adopt an EU approach to capital investment. The European Union runs a central fund of funds that provides the first cornerstone investment into new venture capital funds. This fund of funds will produce a mix of capital from government and bring in the superannuation industry, with fees excluded from benchmarking or potentially paid by the government. And I think we need to grow something from, say, 500 million up to $1 billion per annum and then indexed after that. And the capital should be allocated across the market to give us a breadth and depth of market that doesn't exist at the moment. And I would generally like to see superannuation funds having venture capital investment fees excluded from their benchmarking. I think that would really help drive innovation here and investment in the country. I'd also like to see our $15 billion National Reconstruction Fund enabled to take on more risk into the future industries of the country, and to find ways to make that enablement happen. And lastly, I really want to make sure that the innovation ecosystem isn't the unintended consequences of new reform, as ultimately often happens. We would like to see governments always engage with the ecosystem whenever they're proposing changes to regulations and taxes, such that we who invest in the long game can continue to have the business and create the jobs and the future of this country. In conclusion, my hope is that when our Australian entrepreneurs reach that fork on their journey and choose that path that can make a difference to build a game changer for global gains to investors and society, that we have found the ways to better enable them on that journey. Thank you.
Take a seat. If you'd like to take a seat here, we'll do the Q&A from these seats. All right, well, I'm going to open the floor. I'm sure that there are a myriad of questions from our audience today. I certainly have a lot of questions, but I'm going to restrict myself to just one to start with. Michelle, you're clearly somebody with an analytical brain, and you were drawn to STEM, studying science at the university. Why not engineering?
I know, it's a really good question, and I often look back and I think that myself. I had a father who was an engineer. I even went in and, did the odd jobs as you do as a school-age student, working in his office. But, Dad was a structural engineer, and I didn't really think building and construction was for me. And I didn't really see any women role models in that. And even at school, when you went up to see, talk to the counsellor, engineering was never on the agenda. And that's surprising because, I was a 4-unit maths student. I liked mathematics, but it was certainly never even discussed as an option for me for university. I'm glad the world's changing.
And I hope the world
and I'm glad my daughter,
changing.
made the choice herself to go into biomed engineering.
Fantastic. Do we have any questions from the floor? All right, I see somebody very eager over here.
We've been around for a while. Why is an investment in women's run ventures going up in terms of investment percentage? It actually just seems to go down every year, especially when you remove Canva from those equations.
It's a really tough question, and we obviously believe that in OneVentures, building capability of women investors in venture capital will help eventually lead to more investment in women and in their businesses. We ourselves see a lot more women in the health sciences, and because we have a healthcare practice, we probably have a slightly disproportionate share. But in technology, we just see less opportunities present with female-led teams. The only thing that I would add, though, is if you come to OneVentures, you will be strongly encouraged to develop and grow diversity within your team very quickly and to build out your team with a diverse skill set.
Great. I'm going to throw another question in there. I can't help myself. As we were discussing before starting the lecture today, I very much feel that there is so much capital that's tied up in Australia in superannuation, and I think you've presented some, really fantastic prospects of the idea of accessing just a small amount of that for venture capital in Australia. How can that be implemented in a way that would be palatable and acceptable, knowing that that's Australian, mums and dads' money that's tied up? Can you sort of give some practical advice about what you would advise to, for example, the Economic Roundtable?
One thing I would say is all the superannuation funds are investing in this asset class, but they're doing it offshore into much larger scale funds in much larger markets. So it's actually a scale and size issue, not necessarily that they're not investing in the sector at all. So mum and dad super funds are going there, but they're not going there to build the jobs of Australia in the future. And I think that's a very big difference. And I think if I think about myself, I would like to know that some of my money is going into building the future of this country and not necessarily the future of someone else's country.
Fantastic. All right, and now the floodgates open. So I'm going to go here, and then I saw one over here.
I'm not sure whether it's coming through.
Yep, we can hear you.
Thanks, Michelle. It's been a fantastic experience. But one thing that has impressed me over the years is it's important to attract overseas investment because we just don't have other parts of superannuation. How important is government flip-flopping and on policy and the sovereign risk issue to attracting overseas investments?
So first of all, I would say I think it's very important for consistent policy to attract overseas investors, but also to support the internal market investing as well. Because everyone learns to deal with the market a certain way, and when it changes or if it chops and changes, any uncertainty is bad for investment. Right now, of course, there's a lot of uncertainty viewed in the US market. And what's really interesting is there's a bit of a shift of capital from Europe and Asia away from the US actually into markets like Australia. And I think that's an opportunity for us to capitalise on right now if the government can help us get the settings right. We will potentially be able to attract that capital. The Asian fund of funds out of the US are also redirecting capital from China to Australia and other developed countries like Japan and Korea as well. So there are some real opportunities for us to attract that capital in if we can sort of get our policy settings right and encourage it.
Now we had a question in the grey suit here.
Hey, thank you, Michelle. What a wonderful presentation and a wonderful story, and your journey is really inspiring. Myself, I graduated from Sydney Uni as a structural engineer. I know TTW so well. I'm working with them right now on a project as well. But over the last year, I've been working on some amazing AI project, helping business to automate AI, using AI to automate workflow in businesses. I want to know from your point of view of what will make such company really stand out in the market with your vision, because I can't see what you see right now. Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously if we're looking at new AI companies coming through, we want to see if there's some sort of defensible moat that you can create in your business, because that makes the investment opportunity potentially larger for us and helps protect our investment. So as you're thinking about it, is there a potential way you're managing data or a particular source of data, or are you using access to various different data sources of a particular company that you're bringing together for them to make their businesses work better. So it's sort of thinking about what is it that is going to make you unique in the market, and then be something that could be exportable overseas as well. So, an export market for Australia and also a great product here for our own companies. Does that help?
I think so. I feel the major technologies are going to be developed by big companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and OpenAI. If they're developing all the big technologies, what's left for a new startup?
Yeah, and look, I think it's something you have to watch. But we've always seen big companies developing, and big companies will develop for maybe broad populations or generic solutions. And where companies typically do well is when they think in a more verticalised and deeper approach, and they tackle maybe a large market, but in a deeper vertical than those businesses will be prepared to go. So that's another thing to think about, is become really specialised. So when I look at Focus software, that's now 500 million, Focus didn't try to be everything for everyone. Their competitor was Tableau and Power BI. Now, they're really big companies, but they've built a great business because they are really good at manufacturing and distribution, and companies in that space, and that is all they do, and that is a very big market in its own right. And they win in that market against those big companies all the time.
Right, now we have time for just one more question, and I think I've already promised to take it from over here.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Australia this question comes from actually points you just touched on, which was around export. And Australia is a wonderful field trial country, but I guess the big scale comes from export for growth. What measures do you think we could take nationally to be able to encourage that? Just as a few things, Scott Farquhar at his recent press club mentioned things like digital embassies for data centres, where laws of foreign countries would apply. Other countries have free trade zones and other such measures. Do you have any further suggestions?
Look, Australia has set up landing pads in many countries to support companies as they move offshore in export markets, and I think that's been a really great initiative. Really helping companies actually get talent when they move into new markets. I think that's often one of the biggest hurdles. And then there's a cost to do that. So where does the capital come from to support their move offshore into the larger markets and to bring that export dollar? The other thing I would say is that some of our capital in our own structures is limiting. So I think of our early stage venture capital limited partnerships. Companies can get to a stage where it's hard to invest in them because a lot of their activity is offshore. That activity is offshore and bringing revenue back to Australia. But from a government point of view, they go, well, how many jobs are there versus here? Okay, there's 500 jobs here, but now there's 1,000 jobs there. And the government says so, well, it looks more like an offshore company. But I'm going, this is great. This is Australia. It's an Australian company. They've just gone global. And we have to be prepared to enable that and not see that as something we penalise our companies for. And stop them, maybe accessing capital or stopping us investing in that opportunity as well.
All right, well, it's time for us to wrap up this discussion. Thank you so much, Michelle, for such a wonderful presentation and a wonderful discussion. I'll get you to stay in your seat. We're going to have some sort of concluding words, but just to wrap this up, I think let's have a big round of applause again for Michelle. And now, to finalise things, I'd like you to please join me in warmly welcoming the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and IT, Professor Hesham El Gamal, whose leadership and vision inspires innovation and excellence across our university. He's going to deliver the closing remarks for today's innovation lecture.
Thank you so much, Julie and Michelle, for this. I think from where I was sitting there, music to my ear. You're a role model, and we are very glad that you're here today. We're very fortunate. I learned today that your daughter is with us as well, and we're very proud of this. This resonates with me in many ways. Our new strategy, as is written here, deep technological innovation and collaboration for impact. So we have a very strong focus on translation and moving our research into products. And we also have a very strong focus on women in engineering. This is a big focus area for us. We just launched our first recruitment campaign for targeting women academic and also increasing the scholarships for our women student as well, because we want to build the whole pipeline of stakeholders. So thank you for your time today. It's a pleasure, and thanks to Anna-Marie and David and everybody for being here. And we look forward to more interactions, and maybe you can visit us and we can think of how we can work together on something and to next year. Thank you.